everyone! Today is time to start the new year with the first January monthly plan with me video. If you're interested in seeing the beginning setup of my bullet journal, I'll link that video for you in the description. So today we'll just focus on the January layout. We have this blue floral setup today, and without further introductions, let's get started with the cover spread. I really like to start my monthly setups with a cover spread that usually has a bigger or just more intricate artwork, and I've really been enjoying combining these spreads with a monthly calendar that I use to write out any important dates. I'll be using some navy blue and black craft papers in this video, and then all the coloring will be done with these new Prismacolor colored pencils that I just got. If you've been here for a while, you might remember that I have a set of colored pencils from Tombow, but those have quite dry feel to them, so they don't really work well on dark backgrounds. So that's basically why I got this new set. These seem to be very popular in the colored pencil world, and the set I got is the thin version of the Prismacolors, so they are great for outlines or any detailed strokes that I like to be able to make. One downside to this set is that you will have to sharpen all the pens, which was quite tedious. Anyway, I mainly needed some of the blue and green tones for the flowers we're gonna draw today, and then we'll also need a black and white. So after attaching the navy blue paper to the whole spread, let's start by outlining some of the first flowers and leaves. I thought we would take the first flowers a little bit slower so you really see all the steps, and then we can speed it up a little bit for the other ones on the spread. I think the outlines are probably the most important part of the drawing today, and I used one of the lighter blue pens for the initial sketch so that you could see it a little bit better in the video. If you don't have much experience drawing flowers, I always recommend looking for some reference pictures. It will make everything so much easier because drawing something like this without a guide is not easy. So studying different pictures of flowers will help you with the shapes and angles of the petals. I usually start by marking the center point and then start from the smaller petals in the middle and kind of start to go around the flower while drawing some bigger ones around the smaller ones. Then to get a little bit more movement to the petals, you can add some small imperfections to the edges or add a few folds here and there. But extra details like that are all something that you can work up to over time. So first, I think focusing on the main shapes and getting the petals somewhat symmetrically placed around the center part is already a huge achievement. I didn't really know what order I should go here with the coloring and adding the outlines, so I chose to first add some color to this flower, and then we're outlining everything with the foil paint, which is gonna completely change the look of the flowers. So I started the coloring from the shadows, which is probably the thing that will help you to bring out the flower shape the best. So I pretty systematically placed this black color on the inner parts of the petals and also around any places where the petals overlap each other, which will cause some shadows to the one underneath. If we would have used black paper here, you wouldn't need to add the shadows at all, but I thought this blue color wasn't quite dark enough to be enough for the shadow parts of the flowers. But anyway, after that, I started to pick up and try some of the blue tones, and I was just kind of trying to find a color combination I liked at this point. Something I love about working with colored pencils is that they allow you to work very slowly and build color little by little. It means you're able to control everything in a very different way than, let's say, with watercolors, for example. So I found the whole coloring process quite relaxing, even though I guess it was a bit more time consuming and definitely harder for the hands as some other techniques would be. I was quite happy with how these Prismacolors showed up. They seem to be very highly pigmented and quite hard as well. I didn't have any problems with the color breaking, even though I was using quite a lot of pressure here. Something I also want to point out is that these craft papers are probably not the ideal background for colored pencil drawing. I did some research when buying these pencils, and it seems like the paper itself also has a pretty big impact on how well the colored pencils show up against it. So with a better paper, you will probably be able to create even more vibrant drawings. But after some of this initial coloring, I thought we could next add all the foil paint outlines to see if I needed to retouch these colors or not. I use these same foil paints quite often in my videos because I just absolutely love the look they create. I chose this champagne gold from my set, which I thought looked really beautiful against the blue paper, and then using a very thin watercolor brush, I started to go over all the different petals of the flower. I think this made the world of a difference, but if you don't own a foil paint, I think adding white or maybe a light yellow paint would give a pretty similar effect. My studio lights always capture the shiny effect so well in these videos. It's probably not as intense in real life, but I love the effect when you use your journal and flip the pages around. Anyway, I actually went ahead and decided to add the foil outlines to everything else on this right side, and then do the rest of the coloring afterwards. I think working in that order made a little bit more sense, even though you'll need to be a little bit more careful with the coloring so that you won't go over the foil outlines too much. So then I started to color the rest of the flowers with similar blue tones and the leaves with more green or blue-green tones. I also used the white colored pencil to add some details to the leaves and also to lighten up parts of the petals a bit further. I feel like the coloring didn't show up as well on camera as it did in real life, so I hope you're still able to see the difference between all these details and the background craft paper. But anyway, then I just continued to do the same thing for the rest of the page. I wanted the monthly calendar to go to the left side, so I only focused the leaves and flowers to the edges there, but I did want to throw this one other bigger flower to the center top part to kind of balance things out here. I don't really have anything to say here anymore because I just repeated the same steps over and over. So instead of talking, I'll let you enjoy some relaxing music instead. But then after all the flowers were done, I took the same foil paint and decided to write the January title here in the middle of the page where it drew the most attention. I sketched this out first, which will make the writing about 100 times easier, and then I was just carefully tracing my sketch with the watercolor brush. If you want, you could make the downstrokes of the letters slightly thicker, which will give the letters this fake calligraphy look. I'm not sure what font this is. I don't think I followed anything exactly, but I'll leave some similar font names on the screen in case you want to look them up for some inspiration. I also decided to color a light shadow for the letters with the same black colored pencil, which didn't show up too much, but I think it still made the title stand out a little bit better in the end. But then all we have left is writing out the monthly calendar. I used this lined kind of grayish beige paper that is one of the free paper patterns you can download from my shop. I think I made this sometime last year. I have many different color palettes and textured papers there to download, so I'll leave a link to that to the description. But anyway, I always print these papers on a standard white sticker paper, which just saves me a little bit of time because I don't need to use glue with them. And then I just drew the borders and wrote out the weekday letters and numbers for January. So that's it for the cover spread. I think this must be one of my all-time favorites, and I really hope you'll like this style too. But now it's time to move on, and next we're gonna have some planning and preparation pages that will get us ready for the new year. I decided to switch the paper color here, so I wanted to use the black paper on this spread, and we're gonna create this small Dutch door in the middle. I mainly wanted to create this lace half circle outline, and this way we can also save some time by having the same decorations for these two spreads. I know we just spent a lot of time on the cover spread flowers, but let's draw this left side first before moving on to the planning content. I usually don't like to draw the same decorations on every spread. I just get very bored doing that. So I wanted to draw a little bit different flowers on this spread while keeping the overall coloring and style pretty similar. So here I started from the center part of the flower where we are first drawing these small circles or half circle shapes, and they are slowly getting bigger once we reach the outer edge. After that, we're starting to paint these long daisy-like petals. Some of them can be slightly shorter and kind of in front of the other ones, and some of them can be longer and overlap with each other a little bit. I'd say these are definitely easier and more straightforward to draw compared to the first flowers. So if those looked a little bit too challenging, I'd say go with these instead. The end result is still very beautiful. Then when it comes to the coloring, I started by kind of coloring the whole petal area with this darker ultramarine shade, and then I went over it with a slightly greener or dustier shade of blue. Then lastly, I took one of the lighter shades to add some strokes or highlights, mainly towards the tips of the petals. So this time we don't need to do the shadowing step since the background is doing that part for us. So mainly focusing the colors towards the tips of the petals will create a nice dimensional look. Then the leaves are pretty much the same shape and color as we did on the cover spread. So after the first flower was done, I just finished all the rest here, and then we can move on to the page itself. Something I like to do whenever I remember and have time is to set up a quarter planning spread. This means that I kind of want to make an overall plan for the next 3 months here, which I think is a little bit more realistic time frame for many types of projects or goals than only 1 month. I decided to use this bulkier font for some of the titles, and it really helps to sketch this out beforehand and count an even width for all the letters. You could always use a ruler for the bigger titles especially. I always say that in the videos, and then I look at the footage of me writing these titles and think I should have probably followed my own advice. But anyway, I wanted to start here on the left page by writing out an ideal daily routine, which is something I try to do in my bullet journal every once in a while. I think the new year is a perfect opportunity to try to build some new habits or routines. And you can of course do that any time of the year, but I do think that there's something in the air when the new year starts, and it's just a very concrete, fresh starting point that I think you should take advantage of. Then on the right page, I started by using the same lined paper for this box that I'll just use to write about my overall expectations for the first quarter. And under this, I'll list 3 of the most important things I'd like to achieve. If you set up yearly goals, this could be a moment throughout the year to look back to those and see if there's something you could take on your plate in the next 3 months, or at least get started on something. Before flipping to the next page, I decided to draw these little dots along the lace border just to add a small extra detail to this whole planning section. And then let's flip to the other side, which will be more for the January plan itself. I started with a similar box, and I'll use this one to write out what I want to focus on in January. I'm sure many of us have had a lot going on around the holidays and the end of the year in general, so at least I'll be very excited to start a new month that will hopefully be a little bit quieter. I hope I'll be able to maintain a better work-life balance, and I think that might be my main focus for January. I also wanted to list a few good habits that I'd like to keep up with, and I divided these into healthy habits and productive habits. Then on the right side page, I made this headspace title, and I'll use this section to write about my feelings and overall mental state on the first day of the month, and then again on the 31st to see if something changed or to see how I'm doing in general. So this is definitely a little bit longer and more detailed planning section than what I've had in a while, but I feel like January is usually a month when I have a lot of motivation to keep up with stuff like this, and it will also help me to anchor back to work after spending some time off. But before we flip to the next page, I drew similar big blue daisies here on the other edge, and since there's nothing new again, I'll play some music for you until we're ready to move on. So that's all for the planning section. I really hope you'll find this helpful. But now let's flip over to our next bigger area, which will be for all the weeks in January. I wanted to create another Dutch door layout here, which is my preferred layout for the weekly pages. It basically means that you don't need to create a full spread for each week, which I don't like to do throughout the month. I think I'm the type of bullet journaler who wants to set up everything at once and then doesn't need to think about it before the new month starts. So anyway, we'll need 2 pages here in the middle, and I'm actually gonna use a similar layout that I did like a year or 2 years ago, I can't remember. Funnily enough, the picture of that spread is my most popular Instagram picture of all time, so I thought it was worth giving another go with a different pattern. So I cut these similar half circle borders. I don't know if you can notice it here, but I actually had to remove and reattach these papers because I sketched the whole pattern here in the middle upside down. So I flipped the craft papers around, which made the edges not align perfectly, but with a little bit of fixing, it was still good enough. Anyway, let's start from the drawing here again. So I wanted to create yet another flower pattern using the same colors and tools, but switching the style again slightly. So this time I wanted there to be these vines, a little bit more leaves, and also some smaller white flowers that I think always look so pretty mixed with bigger flowers. I think these flowers are pretty close to peony flowers, maybe a little bit simplified. So I went over the whole picture first with the foil paint to create all these outlines. There's quite a lot going on here, and I think it can be a bit difficult to keep track of all the different petals and extra lines. So just take your time with the sketching phase and make everything as clear as possible. I think this looked a little bit messy at first, but adding the colors luckily helped with that. I started with the black shadows again, and I think it really helps to make these flower shapes a little bit more clear. I again focused most of the shadows to the inner sides of the petals and then added most of the lighter shades towards the top parts. Then I just kept adding colors to the bigger leaves, and I tried coloring the white small flowers first with the white pencil, but in the end I preferred using this white paint pen instead. That was just a little bit quicker and added more intensity. I did use the white pencil to add some light extra swirls here and there, and I think it was super helpful to create very fine strokes to add a bit more detail to this whole pattern. In the end, I really like how this turned out, even though it's quite dramatic decoration for sure. And these white dots along the lace border just added a final touch to this whole thing. But after we have the decorations out of the way, we're gonna set up a very easy and simple weekly layout. So if you don't need too much room for your daily task lists, you could follow this 2-week layout that I'm doing. I believe I have 5 rows for each day, but I'm also adding this kind of master task list in the middle that I'll probably mainly end up using for these 2 weeks. If you want more space though, just add more of these half pages under the middle decoration. You will need to calculate those pages before cutting them though, so just remember to mark the middle page where the decorations will eventually go. Anyway, I'll do this exact same layout to the other side, so for the sake of time, I'll do that later, and it means we are now done with the whole weekly layout. We still have one a little bit more simple spread to go, which will be for the January reflection. I wanted to keep the decorations here a little bit less time consuming. I was actually filming this video on the last day before I left for Finland to spend the holidays with my family, and I'm still not exactly sure how I managed to pull off this whole theme. Anyway, we're going with the black paper here and following this half circle edge theme we apparently have going on now. So I thought it was easier to color these parts to the journal directly and then add the black paper for the rest of the page. I used this thicker black marker that just speeds up the coloring process a little bit, and then after gluing the black papers to the page, I painted just some similar leaves here on the left side that we've already done multiple times in this video. I focused these leaves to the sides again because I wanted to add these two boxes on top of them. I usually like to include pretty similar things to these reflection pages every month, so this time I started with this pretty open-ended what's on my mind question. I like to be able to write in a brain dump way to these pages and get out any thoughts, struggles, or feelings I might have at the end of the month. Then to this second box I wrote I'm grateful for, where I'll take a moment to write about all the amazing things that I appreciate in my life. Then when we moved to the right side page, well, first I wrote the reflection title and then used the top part to write the top 5 and bottom 5 things from the previous month. I thought this was just a little bit shorter way to write the top 5 things I'm happy or proud of, and then the 5 things I would do differently moving forward. Then lastly, we have the short favorites section where I gave myself some room to list all my current favorite things at the end of January. So after all that's done, it wraps up the first monthly layout for 2024. I quite like how this theme turned out. It's maybe not the most wintry theme out there, but I just couldn't bring myself to make another winter landscape layout. I hope you still get lots of drawing and planning inspiration from it. This is also the last video I'll post this year, and my new reading journal videos are coming in early January, so stay tuned for those. If this was your first time around here and you'd like to stick around for more, definitely consider subscribing. But that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely holiday season ahead, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye!